Night arrives quietly, not in a dramatic sweep, not with thunder or ceremony, but the way a thoughtful guest enters a room where everyone is already tired and grateful for silence. The sky deepens into a soft, dark blue. The air cools just enough to remind Stone that it has been holding warmth all day and can finally let go. In this calm stands a Roman temple. It has been here for about 2,000 years. That is long enough to make most modern buildings feel slightly embarrassed about their life plans. The temple does not glow. It does not demand attention. It simply exists, steady and unbothered, as if standing still were its quiet talent. There are no crowds now, no lines, no raised voices, no one checking a phone to see how long they have been standing here. The wide steps rest in shadow. The columns breathe slowly, if stone can be said to breathe at all. If they could talk, they would probably speak very slowly and pause often, not because they are tired, but because they have learned that nothing improves when rushed. The temple once stood at the center of a busy city. People passed it daily, some hurried, some lingered. Most barely noticed it after a while, the way you stop noticing a mountain once you have lived beside it long enough. Time moved forward, then sideways, then in circles. Cities changed, roads shifted, names were forgotten, the temple stayed. Stone has a different relationship with time than people do. A human waits 10 minutes and starts checking the clock. Stone waits centuries and barely registers the delay. The walls have felt heat waves and cold nights. They have listened to rain settle into cracks and wind wander through empty spaces. None of it seemed urgent enough to argue with. There is something comforting about that. The temple does not rush to explain itself. It does not advertise what it has survived. It does not keep a list of accomplishments. It does not care if you understand how it was built or why it still stands. It is not trying to impress you. It is simply still here. If you stand nearby long enough, you might notice how quiet the space feels. Not empty, just settled. Sound behaves differently around old stone. Footsteps soften, voices lower themselves without being asked. Even your thoughts slow down a little, as if they have entered a place with very strict but very gentle rules. The temple does not tell stories loudly. It lets the night do that for it. Shadows stretch along the floor. Corners darken. The sky overhead holds steady, watching from a distance, as it has always done. Somewhere far away, a city hums quietly, but here the sound feels filtered, like it had the good sense to take its shoes off before entering. You might wonder why this structure still matters. After all, it no longer serves the purpose it once did. No one gathers here for formal occasions. No schedules depend on it. No announcements are made from its steps. And yet it remains important in a way that is difficult to explain quickly, which is fortunate because the night has plenty of time. Perhaps what keeps it alive in memory is not what happened here, but how it was built, patiently, carefully, with the assumption that the future would arrive whether anyone was ready or not. The builders worked as if they expected strangers far beyond their own lifetime to walk past these walls and feel something calm and steady, without quite knowing why. That is a rare kind of confidence. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that does not need applause or recognition. The kind that trusts time to do its work and is willing to wait. As the night settles in fully, the temple remains unchanged. The sky darkens a little more. The air cools another degree. Somewhere, someone yawns, and the temple continues to stand, doing what it has always done best, being present, being patient, and reminding the world that not everything needs to move fast to last a very long time. The Romans had a curious relationship with time. They did not treat it like something to chase or fear. They treated it like a guest who would eventually arrive whether invited or not. And when you expect time to stay for a while, you tend to build differently. You build with patience. You build with weight. You build as if the future will have opinions, and you would like those opinions to be mostly positive. A Roman temple was never meant to be a quick glance structure. It was not built to impress someone walking by at a fast pace. It was built to be there long enough that walking by became routine. After a while, people stopped looking up. The building did not mind. It was not insecure. It knew its job was not to win attention, but to hold space. Roman architecture had a very practical personality. It did not ask what looks good this season. It asked what will still be standing when no one remembers this season at all. This mindset shaped everything from the width of the walls to the way stone was stacked and bonded. The Romans assumed the future would be crowded with strangers. They built accordingly. When a Roman architect stood at an empty plot of land, he did not imagine applause. He imagined pressure, the pressure of weather, of crowds, of time, of history, leaning heavily against the walls to see what would happen. And so the design answered with calm confidence. Thick foundations, heavy columns, materials chosen not because they were fashionable, but because they refused to quit. A Roman temple was not designed as a quiet background object. It was designed as a statement of order. It told the surrounding city that structure existed, that systems could hold, that chaos did not get the final word every time. Even when the streets were loud or the politics were messy, the building stayed composed. Stone does not panic easily. This idea of order extended beyond appearance. It was felt physically. You could sense it in the way the steps rose evenly, in the way the columns aligned without hesitation, in the way the building seemed to settle into the ground rather than sit on top of it. The temple did not feel temporary. It felt decided. When compared gently with Greek architecture, the difference becomes clear. Greek temples were beautiful in a way that invited admiration. Their proportions were precise, their lines elegant. They felt like a moment captured perfectly. Roman temples respected that beauty but added a different priority: longevity, presence, weight. Where Greek builders aimed for harmony, the Romans aimed for endurance. Where Greek structures seemed to converse with the sky, Roman structures conversed with the ground. They pressed downward as much as they reached upward. They were less concerned with visual lightness and more concerned with staying put. The Romans borrowed generously from Greek ideas, but they adjusted them to suit their temperament. Columns became sturdier, platforms became higher, walls became thicker. The result was architecture that did not merely decorate space but dominated it gently. It said this place will remain useful long after the paint fades. This was not arrogance, it was foresight. The Romans understood that cities grow messy over time, streets change, buildings around collapse or get replaced. But a structure built with patience can become an anchor, something everything else rearranges itself around. One Roman writer famously described architecture as the balance of strength, usefulness, and beauty. In that order, strength came first. Without it, the rest did not matter. A building that collapses beautifully is still a failure. The Romans were polite about aesthetics, but uncompromising about stability. That philosophy showed up in every decision. Materials were chosen for how they aged rather than how they looked on the first day. Stone that weathered slowly was favored. Concrete mixtures were tested and retested. Builders paid attention to how structures behaved over decades, not weeks. A Roman temple did not rely on luck. It relied on mass. Walls absorbed pressure. Columns carried weight confidently. Arches distributed force evenly. Every element had a job, and it was expected to perform that job quietly for a very long time. Walking around such a building today, you can feel that intention. The stone seems calm, not tired, not stressed. Calm in the way something feels when it was built correctly and has had time to prove it. It does not creak or complain. It simply holds. There is also a subtle humor in this approach. The Romans built as if they expected future generations to judge them. And perhaps they were right. Standing before a 2,000-year-old structure today, it is hard not to think they knew exactly what they were doing. They built with a raised eyebrow toward the future, as if to say, go ahead, try to knock this down. The temple did not ask to be loved, it asked to be respected, and respect comes from consistency, from showing up day after day unchanged by trends or opinions. The Romans understood that respect lasts longer than admiration. Inside the space, the feeling continued. The interior was not overly decorative, it was deliberate. Surfaces were smooth where needed, volumes were balanced. Light entered carefully, nothing shouted. Everything felt intentional. The space encouraged stillness without demanding it. You could stand quietly or walk slowly, and the building accepted either. It did not impose emotion. It allowed it. That restraint is part of what makes Roman architecture feel timeless. It does not tell you how to feel. It simply makes room for feeling. Outside, life continued. Markets bustled, conversations overlapped, footsteps echoed. The temple remained unchanged. It did not compete with the noise, it absorbed it. Over time, people learned to trust that stability. When things felt uncertain, the building remained a reference point, something that did not react. This is perhaps the most enduring quality of Roman architecture. It does not respond quickly. It does not overreact. It does not chase attention. It waits. In a world that often moves too fast, that patience becomes almost comforting. As night settles over the structure now, the same principles apply. The stone cools slowly. Shadows stretch along familiar lines. The building does not care whether anyone is watching. It has already outlived every expectation placed upon it. The Romans did not build temples to be admired once. They built them to be encountered repeatedly, day after day, century after century. The beauty reveals itself slowly through endurance rather than surprise. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson hidden in the stone. Things built with patience do not need to announce themselves. They simply remain. And in remaining, they remind us that stability is not dramatic. It is steady. It is quiet. And it lasts far longer than noise ever does. If you were to ask a Roman temple what its secret was, it would probably not answer right away. Not because it is hiding something, but because it has learned that silence makes people lean in. And if it did answer, it would not speak about glory or ambition. It would speak about materials, ordinary sounding materials, stone, powder, water, patience, the kind of ingredients that do not seem impressive until they outlast entire civilizations. Roman builders did not have access to modern machines or precise digital measurements. They did not have safety manuals printed in color. What they did have was observation. They watched how stone behaved under pressure. They noticed which walls cracked and which ones quietly refused to do so. Over time, they learned that some materials do not complain. They simply do their job and keep doing it. Travertine was one of those materials. It is a pale stone formed by mineral springs. Not flashy, not dramatic. It does not sparkle or glow, but it is strong in a way that feels calm rather than aggressive. Roman builders liked that. Travertine could handle weight, it could handle weather, it could handle being ignored for long periods of time. Many temples used it for foundations and walls because it did not mind carrying responsibility. Marble played a different role. Marble was chosen not just for strength, but for dignity. It aged well, it weathered slowly, it accepted scratches and stains as part of life rather than as failures. When marble columns stood in a Roman temple, they did not demand admiration. They suggested permanence. They gave the impression that the building expected to be around long enough for fashion to stop mattering. But the true quiet genius of Roman construction was not stone alone, it was concrete. Roman concrete was not the same as modern concrete. It behaved differently, it aged differently. In many ways, it improved with time, which is a rare quality even among people. Roman concrete was made from lime water aggregates and volcanic ash. The ash came from regions near volcanic activity. This was not an accident. Roman builders noticed that structures built with this ash resisted cracking and erosion better than others. They did not fully understand the chemistry, but they understood results, and results were persuasive. When water interacted with this mixture over time, new crystals formed inside the concrete. These crystals filled tiny cracks before they could become serious problems. In other words, the material healed itself slowly and quietly. Modern concrete tends to panic when water enters. Roman concrete simply adjusted. There is something almost polite about that behavior. Instead of failing loudly, it adapted. Instead of collapsing, it strengthened. The Romans may not have known the molecular details, but they understood something important. Materials matter more than appearances when the goal is endurance. Pliny the Elder wrote about building materials with the tone of someone who had spent too much time watching structures fall apart. His observations were practical. He described stones that resisted fire, mortars that hardened underwater, mixtures that improved with age. His writing reads less like poetry and more like advice given by someone who has seen mistakes and does not want to see them repeated. Roman builders paid attention to these details. They treated construction as a long conversation with nature rather than a quick argument. They accepted that the environment would test their work constantly. Rain, heat, cold, time. Instead of fighting these forces directly, they designed materials that cooperated with them. When you stand near a Roman temple wall today and place your hand against the stone, there is a strange sensation. The surface is cool, solid, unmoved by your presence. It does not respond, it does not react. It does not care that entire nations have risen and disappeared while it remained. It simply exists. That feeling can be unsettling at first. Modern buildings often feel temporary. They hum, they vibrate, they shift slightly. They remind you that they are systems working very hard to stay upright. A Roman temple does not feel like that. It feels settled, as if it has already made peace with gravity. The walls are thick for a reason. Thickness was not wasteful, it was thoughtful. Thick walls absorbed stress. They softened temperature changes. They resisted sudden movement. Roman builders understood that speed causes problems. Slow transitions were safer. This approach extended to how stones were cut and placed. Blocks were fitted carefully. Mortar was used strategically rather than excessively. The goal was not speed. The goal was reliability. A structure that takes longer to build but stands longer is a fair trade if you are thinking in centuries. There is also a quiet humor in how well these materials have aged. The Romans built with the expectation that time would test their work, and time did exactly that. Wars passed, cities reorganized, technologies changed, and still the stone remained. It is difficult not to imagine the builders feeling a small sense of satisfaction somewhere beyond history. Modern scientists continue to study Roman concrete, trying to recreate its properties. Laboratories analyze samples. Experiments attempt to replicate its self-healing behavior. The Romans would probably find this flattering but unnecessary. From their perspective, the proof is still standing. The materials did not aim for perfection. They aimed for resilience. Small cracks were acceptable. Wear was expected. Aging was normal. What mattered was not avoiding change, but surviving it. This philosophy is embedded in every surface of a Roman temple. The stone accepts marks, the concrete adapts to moisture, the structure responds slowly to stress. Nothing happens suddenly, nothing collapses dramatically. Everything unfolds at a pace that favors endurance. At night, this becomes especially noticeable. The stone releases heat gradually. The walls cool evenly. The building breathes slowly. There are no sharp sounds, no sudden shifts. Even silence feels heavy and stable. Standing there, you might realize that the true achievement of Roman materials was not their strength alone, it was their temperament. They were calm materials. They did not rush. They did not overreact. They handled pressure the way experienced people do, by distributing it and moving on. That calmness is contagious. Visitors often lower their voices without noticing. Movements slow. Thoughts stretch out. The building does not ask for attention, but it changes behavior anyway. The Romans understood something subtle. If you want something to last, you must allow it to age. You must choose materials that do not fear time, materials that expect it. 2,000 years later, the temple still stands. Not perfect, not untouched, but intact in the ways that matter. The stone has done its work. The concrete has kept its promises, and time continues to pass without urgency. If the building could speak, it might offer gentle advice. Choose materials wisely, build slowly, expect change, and do not worry too much about being impressive. Worry about being here tomorrow, and the day after that, and perhaps a few centuries beyond. If If a Roman temple could roll its eyes gently, it might do so when people describe its columns as decoration. Not because decoration is offensive, but because it feels slightly incomplete. The columns would probably prefer to be described as hardworking. They have been standing for 2,000 years without calling in sick, without requesting praise, and without dramatically collapsing to make a point. That deserves at least a quiet nod of respect. Roman columns were never meant to shout. They did not exist to sparkle or demand admiration. They existed to hold weight, guide movement, and create rhythm. Beauty happened as a side effect, which is often how beauty works best. When something does its job well for a long time, it tends to become pleasing to look at. There were different column styles, each with its own personality. Ionic columns carried a sense of balance and calm. Corinthian columns were more elaborate, with leaves curling at the top like stone deciding to imitate plants out of boredom. Composite columns combined elements because the Romans were practical and saw no reason not to use everything that worked. None of these styles were chosen randomly. They were selected based on proportion, load, and how the structure needed to behave. A column is not simply a vertical object. It is a conversation between ground and roof. Weight travels downward through it in an orderly manner. Pressure is distributed rather than resisted. The column accepts responsibility quietly. It does not complain about the roof resting on it day and night. It simply adjusts and continues. Standing among these columns today can feel oddly calming. They rise evenly, spaced with care. The gaps between them are not accidents. They create a rhythm that the eye follows naturally. You do not rush through a colonnade. You walk slower without realizing why. Your body responds to the order before your mind does. The Romans understood this effect. They knew that architecture influences behavior. Columns were arranged to slow movement, to create pause, to encourage awareness of space. When someone entered a temple, they were meant to feel smaller, not insignificant, just appropriately scaled. The building did not dominate aggressively. It gently reminded you that you were inside something larger than yourself. This was achieved without tricks. No flashing surfaces, no overwhelming height, just proportion. The columns were tall enough to command attention, but not so tall that they felt threatening. Their diameter matched their height carefully. Too thin, and they would feel fragile. Too thick, and they would feel heavy-handed. The Romans aimed for balance, which requires patience and measurement, rather than excitement. Above the columns rested the roof, another part of the structure that rarely receives enough quiet appreciation. Roofs are often ignored until they fail. Roman temple roofs rarely failed. They were designed with slopes that managed rain effectively. Water was guided away rather than allowed to linger. Over time, this saved walls from erosion and foundations from weakening. The triangular roof shape was not chosen for drama. It was chosen because it worked. It distributed weight efficiently and handled weather predictably. There is something reassuring about predictability in architecture. A roof that behaves as expected allows everything beneath it to relax. Deep porticos extended from the front of many Roman temples. These were not just grand entrances, they were transitional spaces. They softened the movement from open city to enclosed interior. Shade gathered there. Sound changed. Footsteps echoed differently. This gradual shift helped the body adjust before fully entering the building. The Romans did not rush transitions. They believed movement should unfold slowly. This is why temple entrances often feel generous rather than abrupt. You step in stages. Each step prepares you for the next. There is no sudden surprise. The experience is smooth, almost courteous. The roof structure above also played a role in sound. Hard surfaces reflected noise in a controlled way. Voices carried but did not bounce chaotically. Even silence seemed organized. When wind moved through the space, it did so gently, as if respecting the geometry. One might think these details were excessive, but they served a purpose beyond appearance. A building that manages sound, light, and movement well becomes comfortable without explanation. People linger. They feel safe without knowing why. The Romans valued this effect. They understood that comfort is not always loud or obvious. Another subtle feature was how columns framed views. Looking through them created layers of depth. The city beyond appeared ordered, segmented, calmer. The temple did not isolate itself from its surroundings. It restructured how the surroundings were seen. The spacing of columns also affected light. Sunlight filtered between them in measured intervals. Shadows stretched and shifted slowly throughout the day. Time became visible without needing a device to measure it. The building marked hours gently, without urgency. This relationship with light continued under the roof. Overhangs softened brightness. Harsh glare was avoided. The interior remained cool even during warm days. This was not luxury. It was intelligence. A space that stays comfortable naturally lasts longer because people treat it with care. Roman builders did not rely on decoration to create meaning. They relied on proportion. A well-proportioned space does not demand attention. It earns trust. When something feels balanced, we relax around it. We stop scanning for danger or instability. There is a certain humor in how effective this approach remains. Modern visitors often feel calm without understanding why. They lower their voices. They slow their pace. They behave as if the building has gently requested it, which in a way it has. The columns do not lean in to be admired. The roof does not stretch to impress. Everything remains at ease. That ease is the result of careful planning rather than accident. If you spend enough time near such a structure, you might notice your thoughts doing the same thing. They settle into rhythm. They space themselves out. There is less urgency to move quickly from one idea to the next. The architecture does not demand stillness, but it invites it. At night, this effect deepens. Shadows thicken between columns. The roofline becomes a silhouette against the sky. The building feels less like an object and more like a presence. Not imposing, just there. The Romans understood that power does not need to announce itself loudly to be effective. A structure that whispers can often be heard longer than one that shouts. The temple did not rely on spectacle, it relied on consistency. 2,000 years later, the columns still rise in quiet alignment. The roofs still hold their shape. The details continue to do their work without recognition. That is their success. In a world that often rewards noise and speed, these ancient structures offer a different lesson. Stability comes from balance. Endurance comes from thoughtful design. And sometimes the most impressive thing a building can do is remain calm while everything else changes around it. As you stand there, or imagine standing there, the columns remain steady. The roof remains settled. The space holds you gently. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing asks for explanation. And in that quiet order, sleep comes a little easier, as if the stone itself has decided to keep watch so you do not have to. Stepping inside a Roman temple was never meant to feel crowded. It was not designed for large gatherings or constant movement. Instead, it was built to hold space rather than people. The moment you crossed the threshold, the atmosphere changed. Sound softened, light slowed down. Even your breathing seemed to notice the difference and adjusted accordingly. Roman interiors were intentionally restrained. They did not overwhelm the senses. They did not compete for attention. Walls were solid and surfaces were smooth. Decoration existed, but it knew when to stop. The goal was not stimulation. The goal was weight. Not physical heaviness alone, but emotional gravity. The kind of quiet that feels intentional rather than empty. Unlike later monumental buildings that welcomed large groups at once, Roman temples felt selective. The interior did not invite crowds to rush in. It encouraged pause. You entered slowly, almost without realizing why. The proportions guided your body before your mind had time to question it. Light was treated with extraordinary care. Roman builders understood that light shapes experience more than decoration ever could. Windows were few. Openings were calculated. Illumination entered where it was wanted and stayed out where it was not. The result was a space that felt calm even during the brightest parts of the day. Instead of flooding the interior with brightness, the building allowed light to arrive gently. It slid across surfaces rather than striking them. Shadows formed gradually, corners softened. This slow movement of light made time visible without needing to be measured. Hours passed not by sound, but by shifting brightness. This approach created a sense of enclosure without discomfort. The space felt contained but not confined. It held you rather than trapping you. There was room to stand quietly without feeling watched or hurried. The building did not ask you to do anything. It simply offered stillness. One of the most remarkable examples of this interior philosophy can be found in a certain circular structure that still stands remarkably intact. Its interior does not rely on windows in the traditional sense. Instead, it opens upward. A single round opening at the top allows daylight to enter from above. This opening changes everything. Light does not arrive from the sides. It arrives from the sky. It moves in a slow arc across the interior as the day progresses. Morning light rests gently on one section of the wall. Afternoon light drifts elsewhere. Evening light fades upward. Time becomes a quiet performance of shadows and glow. Standing beneath this opening, you might feel oddly calm. There is no sense of urgency, no countdown, no schedule imposed by bells or announcements. The day unfolds naturally. The building does not measure time. It allows time to reveal itself. The interior surface beneath this opening is carefully shaped. The ceiling curves upward rather than pressing down. It creates a feeling of openness without exposure. You are inside but aware of the sky, sheltered but not isolated. This balance is difficult to achieve, and yet the Romans managed it with confidence. Sound behaves differently in such a space. Voices echo softly but do not linger too long. Footsteps are absorbed by distance and mass. Silence feels thick rather than empty. Even when someone speaks, the sound seems to know where to go and where not to stay. This acoustic quality was not accidental. The shape of the interior controlled how sound moved. Rounded surfaces prevented harsh echoes. Depth softened noise. The building responded to sound the way calm water responds to movement, with gentle ripples rather than splashes. The materials inside contributed to this effect. Stone and concrete absorbed and reflected sound predictably. There were no hollow surprises, nothing rattled, nothing vibrated unnecessarily. The space felt trustworthy. When you spoke, you knew how your voice would behave. Interior decoration followed the same philosophy. Patterns existed, but they did not distract. Colors were chosen to age gracefully. Surfaces reflected light, subtly rather than aggressively. Everything seemed designed to remain pleasant over long periods rather than impressive for short visits. There is a quiet humor in how effective this restraint remains. Modern visitors often lower their voices instinctively. They slow their pace. They pause longer than planned. No signs request this behavior. No instructions are given. The architecture itself does the work. The Romans understood the control does not need to be obvious to be effective. A well-designed interior influences behavior gently. People comply without feeling directed. They feel comfortable rather than managed. The interior space also carried a sense of permanence. Thick walls created a feeling of protection. The ceiling felt secure rather than fragile. There was no sense that the structure was temporary. It did not feel like it might need repair next year or renovation soon after. It felt finished. This sense of completion changes how people experience space. When something feels settled, we relax within it. We stop anticipating collapse or disruption. Our attention shifts inward rather than outward. Time inside such a space feels different. Minutes stretch slightly. Thoughts slow. There's less urge to check for progress. Without constant stimulation, the mind begins to wander gently. Ideas drift rather than collide. The Romans may not have described this effect in modern psychological terms, but they clearly understood it intuitively. They built interiors that calmed the nervous system before anyone knew what a nervous system was. The absence of excess was deliberate. There was nothing to distract from the space itself. No unnecessary movement, no visual noise. This allowed the building to remain relevant even as tastes changed. Trends passed, but restraint aged well. At night, the interior transformed again. Darkness deepened the sense of enclosure. The opening above became a circle of shadow or starlight, depending on the sky. The walls faded into softer outlines. The space felt even quieter. Moonlight entering from above created subtle changes. Shadows shifted slowly. The ceiling seemed higher. The interior breathed differently. Night did not shut the space down. It softened it further. Standing inside at night, you might feel as though the building is listening rather than speaking, not demanding attention, simply present, patient, unconcerned with whether anyone understands its design or history. This patience is perhaps the most impressive feature of Roman interior architecture. It does not try to explain itself. It does not rush the experience. It allows people to arrive at their own pace and stay as long as they need. In a world that often fills interior spaces with noise and distraction, this approach feels surprisingly modern. Or perhaps it feels timeless because it addresses something fundamental. People need places that do not ask too much of them. The Romans built interiors that could be occupied without effort, spaces where nothing needed to happen. where time could pass without being accounted for. As you imagine standing inside such a structure, the weight of the walls feels reassuring. The light moves slowly, sound rests, thoughts settle. The building holds the moment gently. Nothing insists, nothing interrupts. The space simply exists, and in doing so allows you to do the same. And that may be the quiet genius of the Roman temple interior. Not what it contained, but what it allowed. Silence, slowness, and the rare comfort of being somewhere that does not expect anything from you at all. A Roman temple was never meant to sit alone like a forgotten monument on the edge of town. It did not hide behind fences or wait patiently for visitors to make a special trip. Instead, it stood right where life happened, near roads, near open squares, near the places where people argued, laughed, traded goods, and occasionally lost their sandals. The temple was not separate from daily life. It was stitched directly into it. Imagine waking up in a Roman city at first light. Shops open slowly, doors creak. Someone sweeps dust from a threshold with more dedication than enthusiasm. And there it is, the temple, already awake in its own quiet way. Not glowing, not calling attention to itself, just standing where it always has. You pass it on your way to work. You pass it again on your way home. Eventually you stop noticing it consciously, and yet it stays with you. The Romans were experts at placing important things where they would be seen without being stared at. The temple often stood near the forum. This was the heart of the city. Not a ceremonial heart, but a practical one. The forum was where news spread, where deals were made, where voices overlapped, and opinions collided gently or not so gently. By placing the temple here, the Romans made it part of the background rhythm of life. People walked past the temple while carrying baskets. Children ran nearby without giving it a second glance. Merchants shouted prices. Friends stopped to talk. The temple watched all of this without comment. It did not demand participation. It did not interrupt. It simply remained present like a calm neighbor who has lived on the same street for decades and has seen everything already. This presence mattered. Even without any formal activity happening inside the building influenced behavior. Streets curved around it, paths adjusted themselves, sight lines opened toward it. The city organized itself with the temple as a reference point, not because it was imposing, but because it was reliable. A Roman city did not treat the temple as something fragile. It was not roped off or protected from everyday life. It was sturdy enough to be part of it. People leaned against its steps. Shadows gathered near its walls. Conversations happened in its shade. The temple did not mind. It was built for endurance, not delicacy. The Romans understood something subtle about architecture. When a structure becomes part of daily movement, it gains meaning without effort. People do not need to reflect on it actively. They feel it instead. The temple became familiar, and familiarity builds trust. This trust extended beyond any specific purpose. Even when no one entered the building, its presence mattered. It anchored the space around it. The open square felt more ordered because it was there. The roads felt intentional because they led past it. The city felt complete with it, standing quietly at its center. There was no need for ceremony to feel this effect. You did not need to stop or look up. The building worked on you anyway. It influenced pace. It encouraged pause without forcing it. People naturally slowed near it, not out of obligation, but because the space asked them to. The temple acted like a deep breath within the city, a place where movement softened slightly, where sound behaved differently, where the rhythm of walking changed, just enough to be noticed only after the fact. Unlike modern monuments that often isolate themselves from daily life, Roman temples accepted wear and proximity, their steps smoothed under countless feet, their corners rounded slightly over time. These marks were not damage, they were evidence of participation. The temple was not offended by being used as a meeting point. It did not protest when someone said, "Let us meet near the big columns." It did not object to being a landmark for directions. Turn left at the temple. Go straight until you see the steps. These casual references kept the building alive in conversation, even when no one spoke about it directly. In this way, the temple became a shared memory rather than a distant object. Everyone knew it. Everyone had passed it. Everyone had been near it, often enough that it became part of how they imagined their city. This integration also meant that the temple witnessed ordinary moments, small arguments, quiet reconciliations, deals that went well and deals that did not, laughter, frustration, waiting. The building absorbed these moments without reacting. It was patient enough to hold all of them. Over time, this created a relationship. Not a dramatic one, a subtle one. People felt comforted by the temple without needing to explain why. It had always been there. It would likely remain there. In a world where change was constant, this stability mattered. The Romans did not separate life into sacred and ordinary spaces as strictly as later cultures might. They allowed important structures to exist alongside everyday routines. This closeness made those structures feel relevant rather than distant. The temple did not demand silence. It did not require special behavior simply by existing. It allowed life to continue around it, and in doing so, it became woven into memory. Even when the city changed, the temple remained a reference point. New buildings rose, old ones disappeared, streets shifted, the temple stayed. It adapted by doing nothing at all. As generations passed, the building became older than anyone living nearby. People stopped knowing who built it or when, but they still knew where it was. That knowledge was enough. There is something quietly humorous about this kind of endurance. The temple did not try to be memorable. It simply kept showing up, day after day, century after century. While trends came and went, it stayed exactly where it was. Modern cities often isolate important buildings behind barriers or separate them from daily flow. Roman cities did the opposite. They trusted their architecture to handle proximity. They built things strong enough to be lived with. This approach created a sense of continuity. The temple was not a destination. It was part of the journey. You encountered it whether you planned to or not. At night, the effect continued. Lamps flickered. Shadows gathered around the columns. People passed more quietly. The temple remained visible in outline, familiar, steady, a presence even in darkness. Walking past it at night might feel reassuring. The building did not sleep, it did not change. It held the space gently while the city rested. This role as a quiet neighbor may be one of the most important aspects of Roman temple design. Not its size, not its materials, not its decoration, but its willingness to be part of everyday life without insisting on importance. The Romans built temples that belonged to the city rather than floating above it. They trusted people to form relationships with buildings through repetition rather than instruction. As you imagine walking through such a city, the temple appears again and again, always there, always calm, never asking for attention. And perhaps that is why these structures still matter today. They remind us that permanence does not require noise, that importance does not need isolation, and that sometimes the most meaningful presence is the one that quietly shares your daily path without ever asking you to notice it at all. In that quiet companionship, sleep feels easier, thoughts slow. The mind rests, knowing that somewhere nearby something solid and patient continues to stand, watching over nothing in particular, simply being there. Empires tend to leave loudly. They announce themselves with urgency, with decisions, with movement, with paperwork and marching and arguments about who forgot to sign what. When they collapse, people often expect noise in the opposite direction. Fires, chaos, sudden emptiness. But the Roman Empire did something far less dramatic. It slowly stopped holding itself together. And while that happened, something curious occurred. The temples did not leave with it. The empire unraveled over time. Borders shifted, administrations weakened, roads became less carefully maintained, names on documents changed, authority moved from one place to another without asking permission from the stones. Yet the temples remained exactly where they had always been. They did not follow the empire into history. They simply stayed put. This creates a strange contrast when you think about it. Political power disappeared, buildings remained. The thing that governed millions vanished. The thing that quietly occupied a piece of ground continued to exist. This difference reveals something important about how humans relate to time, and how stone does not. A political system depends on agreement, on cooperation, on belief in structure. When that agreement weakens, the system dissolves. A building does not require agreement. It does not care who is in charge. It does not need recognition. Gravity remains gravity. Walls remain walls. The temple did not vote on whether the empire should continue. It just stood there. As authority faded, cities changed their priorities. Some buildings were abandoned, some were dismantled. Stones were reused elsewhere. But many temples were too solid to bother with. Removing them required effort. And effort was in short supply during times of transition. It was easier to leave them alone. Some temples found new purposes. Not suddenly, not officially, slowly. A roof that did not leak was useful. Thick walls offered protection from weather. Open interiors provided space. Without ceremony, these buildings adapted. They became storage areas, meeting places, landmarks. Sometimes just large, quiet structures that everyone knew not to move. Other temples were left entirely alone. No one needed them. No one wanted to dismantle them either. They stood in partial silence. Grass grew nearby. Dust gathered. Birds made temporary decisions about ownership that no one challenged. Time moved on without urgency. And then there were temples that became foundations for something new. Cities do not enjoy starting from nothing. They prefer to build on what already exists. A solid platform saves effort. Thick walls suggest permanence. So new structures rose using old stones. Streets aligned themselves around familiar forms. The temple did not disappear. It simply changed how it participated. This slow transition highlights a key difference between political collapse and physical survival. A system ends when people stop maintaining it. A building ends only when someone actively removes it, or when nature slowly insists otherwise. Many Roman temples avoided both fates by being quietly useful or impressively stubborn. There is something almost humorous about how unconcerned these buildings were with history. While people debated power and legitimacy, the temples waited. While new leaders made declarations, the stone absorbed sunlight and released it at night. While borders changed, the walls remained in the same place they had always been. From the perspective of the temple, the empire was a phase, an important one perhaps, but still just a phase. The building had existed before certain decisions were made and continued after those decisions stopped mattering. Walking near such a structure today can feel oddly grounding. You are standing beside something that outlasted systems far more complicated than your daily schedule. The temple does not offer advice. It simply demonstrates endurance. Over time, these buildings became part of new cities that barely remembered their original context. People passed them without knowing why they were built. Names changed. Stories blurred. The temple became a background presence rather than a focal point. This anonymity did not weaken it. In some ways, it protected it. When a building stops being associated with power, it becomes less likely to be targeted. It becomes furniture rather than symbol, and furniture tends to survive longer. The Roman temples that remain today do so not because they were continuously revered or protected. They survived because they were allowed to exist without constant attention. They were heavy enough to resist removal and calm enough to avoid conflict. There is a lesson here that does not require interpretation. Things that depend on control end when control fails. Things that depend on balance last longer. The empire needed coordination. The temple needed gravity. When coordination collapsed, gravity remained reliable. As centuries passed, these structures aged visibly. Stones softened, surfaces weathered, cracks appeared, and then stabilized. The temples did not pretend to be unchanged. They aged honestly. This honesty is part of their appeal. You can see time on them, not as damage, but as evidence. The building has been present long enough to collect it. Modern observers sometimes search for dramatic endings. They want a moment when everything fell apart, but history rarely cooperates. The Roman Empire faded unevenly. The temples endured unevenly as well. Some survived almost intact. Others remain as fragments. Columns without roofs, walls without context. And yet, even fragments speak. A single column standing alone still tells you something. It tells you that the building was once larger, that it mattered enough to be built carefully, that it was strong enough to remain partially upright after everything around it changed. This partial survival might be the most honest outcome. Not total preservation, not total destruction. Something in between, enough to remember without fully reconstructing. The difference between political collapse and physical survival becomes especially clear at night. When the city quiets and lights soften, the outline of old stone remains visible. The building does not belong to any era at that moment. It simply exists in the present. No flags, no declarations, just mass and shadow. The temple does not mourn the empire. It does not celebrate its endurance. It does not interpret history. It simply stands where it was placed. In this way, Roman temples became witnesses rather than participants. They observed transitions without comment. They did not take sides. They did not need to. This neutrality allowed them to survive changes that destroyed more vocal symbols. Power invites challenge. Stone invites patience. Even today, cities continue to build around these structures. Roads curve, squares adjust. Modern life negotiates space with ancient walls. The temple remains a reference point not because it demands it, but because it occupies space confidently. There is a quiet comfort in this continuity. Knowing that something endured the collapse of an empire can make everyday worries feel smaller. If stone can remain calm through centuries of change, perhaps the day can be handled as well. The Roman Empire is studied in books. The temples are experienced directly. You can touch them, walk beside them, sit near them without needing to understand their full history. That physical presence is the key difference. Systems disappear into memory. Buildings remain in space. The temples remind us that not everything meaningful moves at the same pace as power. Some things are built to last beyond relevance. And so when the empire quietly faded, the temples stayed. Not out of defiance, not out of loyalty, simply because they were built to endure. They waited, they adapted, they aged. And in doing so, they proved something simple. Collapse does not always erase. Sometimes it simply rearranges what remains. As night settles again and the city rests, the old stone stands quietly, unconcerned, unhurried. The empire is gone, the temple remains. And that is not a miracle. It is just what happens when something is built patiently enough to outlast the need for explanation. Sleep comes easier when you imagine that kind of steadiness nearby. Something that does not react, something that does not hurry, something that remains even when everything else moves on. There is something slightly puzzling about the modern fascination with Roman temples. After all, we live in an age of glass towers, digital maps, instant communication, and buildings that light up in different colors, depending on the mood of the marketing department. And yet, people continue to travel long distances, read thick books, watch long documentaries, and spend quiet hours studying stone structures that were built 2,000 years ago by people who thought plumbing was a revolutionary achievement. This fascination is not loud or dramatic. It does not feel like obsession in the usual sense. It is quieter than that, more persistent, like a tune that keeps returning when the room gets quiet, even if you do not remember when you first heard it. Scholars return to Roman temples again and again. Architects sketch them endlessly. Artists photograph them from every angle, at sunrise, at noon, at night, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in complete silence. Historians argue gently over details that most people would never notice, and still the interest does not fade. Instead, it deepens. What is interesting is that this fascination is not driven by mystery in the conventional sense. Roman temples are not unknown. They have been measured, cataloged, drawn, scanned, reconstructed digitally, and described in languages that no one speaks casually anymore. And yet, knowing more about them does not make them feel finished. Projects like Rome Reborn attempt to digitally reconstruct entire sections of the ancient city. Streets reappear, buildings regain their height, temples return to their original proportions on glowing screens. Viewers can walk through these reconstructions virtually, floating above ancient roads with the ease of someone who does not have to worry about sandals or dust. And still, after the headset comes off, people want to see the real stone. They want to stand beside it, touch it, sit near it. The digital version explains, but the physical version reassures. This tells us something important. The fascination is not about information, it is about presence. Modern life moves quickly. Even when nothing urgent is happening, the mind behaves as if something might. Notifications arrive without warning, schedules overlap, decisions stack up. The day rarely settles on its own. Silence feels suspicious. Stillness feels unproductive. Roman temples offer something radically different. They do not update, they do not respond, they do not adapt to trends, they do not care whether you understand them fully or at all. They simply remain. This creates a strange sense of relief. Standing near a Roman temple, you are confronted with an object that does not participate in urgency. It has no deadline, no next phase, no plan for improvement. It is not waiting for approval. It is not performing. For a modern mind accustomed to constant evaluation, this is disarming. Architects study these buildings not because they want to copy them exactly, but because they represent a level of confidence that feels rare today. The structures assume their own right to exist. They do not justify themselves. They do not explain their choices. They stand because they were built to stand. This confidence is deeply attractive in a world where even permanent things feel temporary. Buildings are designed for lifespans that match investment cycles rather than centuries. Materials are chosen for efficiency rather than patience. Many modern structures feel like they are already planning their exit. Roman temples did not plan an exit. They planned endurance. Artists are drawn to this quality as well. The way light touches stone, the way shadow settles into grooves carved long ago, the way surfaces age without becoming irrelevant. There is no rush to capture the perfect image because the subject does not change quickly. The temple is patient with the camera. It does not mind if you try again tomorrow. Historians, too, return to these structures not just for facts, but for orientation. In a world where narratives change rapidly, the temple provides a stable reference point. It does not argue with interpretation. It simply exists as evidence that people once built things slowly and carefully, assuming they would be judged by strangers they would never meet. What draws modern minds most strongly, however, is not technical mastery or historical importance. It is the sense of order these structures represent. Roman temples are composed. They are balanced. Their proportions make sense, even if you cannot explain why. Standing near one, the body relaxes before the mind understands. The space feels intentional. Nothing feels accidental. This sense of order is powerful because modern life often feels fragmented. Information arrives without hierarchy. Priorities blur. Everything competes for attention. The temple offers a counterexample. It shows what happens when elements are arranged with restraint and clarity. This does not mean Roman life was calm or simple. It was not. But the architecture suggests an aspiration toward stability, toward coherence, toward something that could remain standing even when circumstances became unpredictable. In this way, the temple becomes an answer to a modern question that is rarely spoken aloud. What does it feel like when something is truly stable? Not flexible. Not adaptable. Stable. The answer is not excitement. It is relief. Standing beside ancient stone, people often find their thoughts slowing without effort. They stop planning. They stop comparing. They stop anticipating interruption. The building does not demand engagement. It allows presence. This is why museums continue to display fragments of Roman architecture even when context is incomplete. A broken column still communicates weight. A section of wall still communicates patience. You do not need the whole story to feel the effect. Books continue to be written not because the subject is unresolved, but because it remains relevant. Each generation asks different questions of the same stone, and the stone does not resist. It offers itself to interpretation without needing it. There is also a quiet humor in how seriously modern people take these structures. We measure them with lasers, we analyze stress patterns, we simulate their collapse digitally just to see how long it would take. The temples endure this attention with remarkable indifference. They have survived floods, fires, neglect, reuse, and misunderstanding. A few curious academics are hardly a challenge. Perhaps the deepest reason modern minds remain drawn to Roman temples is that they suggest a different relationship with time. Not time as a resource to be managed, but time as a medium to move through. The temples do not hurry you. They do not promise transformation. They do not offer solutions. They simply stand there reminding you that it is possible for something to exist without constant justification. In a world that rewards speed and visibility, this quiet endurance feels almost radical. The temple does not claim to fix anxiety. It does not address uncertainty directly. It does not respond to modern fears. And yet, standing near it, those fears soften. Not because they are solved, but because they are placed next to something that has outlasted far greater instability. The Roman temple becomes a kind of calm answer, not in words, but in mass, in proportion, in stillness. It says, without saying anything at all, that chaos is not new, that uncertainty is not unique, that things have fallen apart before, and something solid remained afterward. This message does not require belief. It does not require agreement. It simply requires proximity. That is why people keep returning. Not to worship, not to idealize the past, but to remember what stability feels like. As night settles and the modern world quiets for a moment, the ancient stone remains unchanged. The screens dim, the noise fades, and there it is, still standing, still balanced, still unconcerned. And for a while, that is enough to let the mind rest. A Roman temple was never just a pile of carefully stacked stone. Stone was only the visible part, the easier part. What truly held the structure together was something far less tangible and far more patient. Time, repetition, and an almost stubborn refusal to hurry. If you stand beside such a temple long enough, you begin to sense this. The stone does not feel rushed. The walls do not feel eager to impress. Everything about the structure suggests that whoever built it was comfortable waiting, comfortable repeating the same motions day after day, comfortable knowing that the result might not be fully appreciated by the people doing the work. The Romans did not build with urgency. They did not build to finish quickly and move on to the next project. They built as if they expected the building to outlive them. And because of that expectation, every decision carried weight. Time is embedded in the walls, not just the time it took to construct the building, but the time it was designed to endure. Every layer assumes that another layer of years will arrive. Rain, heat, cold, quiet mornings, noisy afternoons, generations passing without announcement. Repetition played a quiet role in this endurance. The Romans repeated methods that worked. They did not constantly reinvent for novelty. If a technique proved reliable, it was used again, and again, and again. Repetition created confidence. Confidence allowed patience. A column carved today would resemble a column carved decades earlier. A foundation laid in one city would resemble a foundation laid in another. This consistency was not laziness. It was discipline. It allowed builders to understand materials deeply, to predict how stone would behave after many seasons. Modern culture often treats repetition as a failure of imagination. The Romans treated it as a form of respect for reality. Reality behaves predictably. Gravity does not surprise us. Weather patterns repeat. Materials age in recognizable ways. Repeating what works is not boring. It is intelligent. The temple absorbed this intelligence quietly. Nothing flashy announced it. The structure did not advertise innovation. It demonstrated reliability. Another ingredient was slowness. Roman construction moved at a pace that modern schedules would find uncomfortable. There were no deadlines measured in weeks. There were expectations measured in decades. The builders were not racing a clock. They were cooperating with it. Slowness allowed observation. If something did not behave as expected, it could be adjusted. If a material failed, it was noted and avoided in the future. Mistakes were absorbed into collective knowledge rather than hidden. This slow approach also shaped the builders themselves. Working on a structure that would not be finished quickly changes how you think. You stop measuring progress by completion and start measuring it by consistency. You focus on doing the task well rather than finishing it fast. In this way, the temple was built not only from stone, but from habits. Habits of care, habits of repetition, habits of attention. The Romans also built with the assumption that they were not the final audience. They knew future generations would encounter the building without knowing their names, without understanding the context, without sharing the same priorities. And they accepted this. They did not try to explain themselves to the future. They built something solid and let it speak on their behalf. This perspective contrasts sharply with modern construction. Today, many buildings are designed for short lifespans. They anticipate replacement. Materials are chosen for efficiency rather than endurance. Designs respond to current trends with little concern for how they will age. This is not necessarily wrong, it is simply different. Modern life moves quickly. Needs change rapidly. Flexibility is valued. But there is a quiet cost to this approach. When everything is temporary, nothing feels settled. Spaces begin to feel provisional. Buildings feel like they are waiting to be replaced. This can subtly affect how people relate to their surroundings. Roman temples did the opposite. They assumed permanence. Even if they were wrong, they acted as if they were right. And that confidence shaped the experience of the space. A building that expects to remain encourages people to slow down, to linger, to form memory. It becomes a reference point rather than a disposable object. The temple was also built with repetition in mind beyond construction. It was meant to be encountered repeatedly, day after day, year after year. The design did not rely on surprise, it relied on familiarity. Each encounter deepened recognition. People learned the shape of the steps, the spacing of the columns, the way shadows moved across the surface. This familiarity created comfort. Comfort does not require excitement. It requires reliability. The temple provided that quietly. Time continued to layer itself onto the structure. Footsteps smoothed stone, weather softened edges, small changes accumulated slowly. The building aged rather than deteriorated. This aging was expected. It was not considered failure. Materials were chosen because they aged gracefully. Cracks were anticipated. Wear was normal. The goal was not to avoid change, but to survive it. This philosophy required humility. The builders knew they could not control everything. They accepted that the future would alter their work. They focused on resilience rather than perfection. Modern design often aims for flawless surfaces. Roman design aimed for lasting ones. A scratch was acceptable. A collapse was not. There is something quietly humorous about this difference. Modern structures sometimes struggle to last a few decades without major repair. Roman temples survived centuries with nothing more than patience and gravity. This does not mean Roman life was superior or more enlightened. It simply means their priorities differed. They valued continuity. They trusted time rather than fighting it. The temple embodies this trust. It does not resist age. It incorporates it. It wears time like a record of experience rather than a flaw. Standing near such a building today, you are standing beside accumulated patience. Every year that passed without collapse added another layer of proof, another confirmation that the slow approach worked. This is why these structures feel calming. They represent something rare, confidence without urgency. The temple does not rush you. It does not ask you to hurry past or hurry inside. It does not signal that something is about to change. It simply remains. In a world filled with notifications and updates, this steadiness feels almost radical. The building does nothing and yet accomplishes something important. It creates a sense of continuity. Modern people often struggle with the feeling that everything is provisional. Jobs, homes, technologies, even identities change quickly. The temple offers a contrast. It suggests that some things can be built to last without constant revision. This suggestion does not judge modern life. It does not say one approach is better. It simply offers an alternative vision, a reminder that another rhythm is possible. The Romans built for generations they would never meet. They accepted that they would not control how their work was used or understood. They focused on building something that could hold space regardless. This long view influenced every decision. Materials were chosen for how they behaved over time. Designs avoided unnecessary complexity. Forms favored balance. Even the act of building itself was repetitive. Stones placed one by one, mortar applied again and again, days that looked much like the days before. This repetition built not only the structure but the mindset behind it. The temple is therefore a record of sustained attention, attention given without expectation of immediate reward. Modern culture often rewards speed and novelty. The Roman temple rewards patience and consistency. Neither approach is inherently right or wrong. They simply reflect different relationships with time. The temple stands as evidence that time can be treated as an ally rather than an enemy. That repetition can create strength rather than boredom. That slowness can produce stability rather than inefficiency. As night settles around the ancient stone, the building remains unchanged. It has seen countless nights like this. It does not react. It does not anticipate. It simply exists within the rhythm it was built for. This existence does not demand interpretation. It does not offer lessons loudly. It just stands there quietly, reminding anyone nearby that endurance is possible. Sleep comes easier when you imagine such steadiness nearby. Something built without hurry. Something content to repeat its presence day after day. Something not anxious about the future. The temple was built from stone, yes. But more importantly, it was built from time, from repetition, from patience. And that is why it remains when so much else has moved on. Night returns the way it always does, without announcement. The air cools. The sounds of the city soften as if someone gently turned the volume knob down and then decided that was enough effort for one evening. And there it is again, the temple. Still standing, still exactly where it was the last time you noticed it, and the many times you did not. Nothing about the structure suggests urgency. It does not lean forward as if waiting for something to happen. It does not pull attention toward itself. It stands the way something stands when it has nothing left to prove. The stone holds the memory of daylight but releases it slowly, the way a calm person releases a long breath after a day that did not require much explanation. You do not need to understand the temple to be near it. You do not need to know when it was built, who planned it, or why certain measurements were chosen. The building does not test you on this information. It does not quiz you at the door. It does not demand comprehension before offering presence. It simply allows you to exist nearby without expectation. This is part of what makes the moment restful. Modern life often insists that everything be understood, labeled, summarized, and justified. The temple offers no such request. It does not need interpretation to function. It is content with being seen or not seen, remembered or forgotten, passed by or paused beside. As night deepens, the details soften. Sharp edges fade into shadow. The columns become outlines rather than objects. The roofline blends gently into the sky. The temple does not disappear, but it stops insisting on clarity. It becomes enough to know that it is there. This lack of insistence feels kind. The building does not demand focus when focus is tired. It does not ask you to stay awake and attentive. It seems perfectly comfortable sharing space with someone who is slowly drifting toward rest. Somewhere nearby, footsteps pass and then fade. A door closes. A sound travels briefly and then dissolves into quiet. The temple remains unaffected by these small events. It has witnessed far louder moments and far longer silences. Tonight is simply another calm interval. There is no lesson hidden here that needs to be extracted before sleep is allowed. The temple is not offering a moral or a message. It is not whispering wisdom or suggesting improvement. It is not trying to change you. It is simply present. That presence is enough. The stone has endured rain, heat, cold, neglect, attention, misunderstanding, and curiosity. It has been useful and ignored. It has been central and peripheral. None of this has altered its basic condition. It stands. In a world that often feels like it is constantly adjusting, updating, and reconfiguring itself, this steadiness can feel surprising, almost humorous. Everything else seems busy making plans, while the temple remains committed to the radical idea of staying put. You might notice your own body responding. Shoulders relax slightly. Breathing slows without instruction. Thoughts stretch out instead of piling up. There is less urgency to resolve anything before the night ends. The temple does not hurry you. It does not suggest the time is running out. It does not remind you of unfinished tasks. It has existed through centuries of unfinished tasks and has learned that they resolve themselves or they do not. Either way, night arrives. Standing near such a structure, or imagining standing near it, can make worries feel smaller. Not because they are unimportant, but because they are placed next to something that has survived change without reacting to it. The contrast is gentle but effective. The temple does not compete with your thoughts. It does not interrupt them. It lets them pass the way clouds pass a quiet sky. Nothing gets stuck. Nothing needs to be held tightly. This is not a dramatic ending. There is no final revelation, no summary that ties everything together neatly. The building would probably find that unnecessary. Instead, there is only the simple awareness that something solid remains while the world rests. The temple continues to stand, not as a reminder of greatness or achievement, but as evidence of patience. It does not rush into meaning. It allows meaning to arrive slowly, if it arrives at all. As the night grows quieter, the space around the structure feels held, not controlled, not managed, just held, the way a calm presence holds a room without speaking. You are free to leave or stay, to think or not think, to remember or let go. The temple does not follow you. It does not mind either way. And that is perhaps the most restful thought of all. There are things in this world that do not hurry to disappear, things that remain without effort, without explanation, without asking for attention. They stand quietly through noise and silence alike. The temple is one of them. And knowing that such steadiness exists somewhere, even if only in imagination at this moment, makes it easier to let the night take over, to stop holding the day so tightly, to allow rest to arrive in its own time. The temple stays. You soften. The night continues. And that is enough.